We're going to break down what happened at this year's World Shot Put Series, some of the biggest hammer throws in history on the pro scene and NCAA. And we're going to break down some big discus marks from athletes you might not expect. All this and more on this week's Throw Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Throw Show. I am, of course, your host, Jason, joined, as always, by the people's champ, Coach Sam Weeks.
What it do, go C's.
It's fitting that I'm wearing the 76ers hat tonight. So we're here to break down some of the biggest throws in the world going on right now, and we got some historic throws that happened specifically in the hammer. I think it was going to be a pretty heavy hammer episode after all said and done. But before we dive into that, we're going to go right into the action, and that is the return of the World Shot Put Series presented by the world record holder in the shot put himself, Ryan Krauser. And we have a defending champion at the Drake Relays World Shot Put Series. On screen right now, you just seen Roger Steen throw over 73 feet. He was the only athlete to cross the 73-foot line in that competition to defend his championship, defend the belt, if you will, defend his status as king of the ring in the World Shot Put Series. Sam, we've been talking about Roger a lot this season. Specifically, his indoor campaign was great. He started off well outdoors of 2177 at the Ramona Invite that we were recently at 2 weeks ago. And now he's following it up with another World Shot Put Series victory. And we're going to follow up also what he competed at in the Drake Relays. Sam, I don't know if you had a chance to watch this competition live, but the World Shot Put Series continues to excite and bring the hype for the sport of throwing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like, once again, we just had a banger of an event with the World Shot Put Series. I think this year was very entertaining. One of our very own, Nick Curtis, was able to compete.
Yep.
He didn't do as well as he would have liked, but, to see a GS, faithful in this competition, I thought was really dope. Hopefully in the future we can get more of our guys out there, but I think just for the second year in a row, we got a very entertaining competition, with, a lot of the top guys. And, our boy Roger, D3, faithful, coming back and claiming the dub.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to mention here is when we talked about this last year is I'm pretty sure Roger set another personal best in this competition because I don't think his marked PB is actually 73 feet. And this throw clearly goes over the line. Mm-hmm. So we're probably looking at a throw that's somewhere between like 2220 mid to 2230. Roger's in clearly really, really good shape. Mm-hmm. And he backed it up with the victory at Drake only a couple days later, which we'll cover just in a second. But I kind of want to get a little deeper thoughts on your side. Like, how do you feel about the World Shot Put Series now that we're entering its second season? I believe this is its third overall event. I think ironically, maybe they did an even better job this year. I think because now we've had a year to digest the rules and stuff like that, so you know what to expect. But I thought the whole presentation was very entertaining.
Yeah, no, dude, I think, obviously last year we were a little skeptical because we were like, oh, we don't really know how the format would kind of play out. But, as the event happened, we were able to watch it. I know, I had a lot of fun watching. I was like, dude, this is so entertaining, and just, the drama and the suspense of, getting tosses over the line and, hitting a toss on the line and, using your challenge flag and whatnot. I felt like that was very entertaining, and that's, what this sport needs outside of, the diehards who watch every competition. It's like, we get a special event, with some of the best shot putters, in our area, and they all get to go have fun.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, that's super cool. And obviously, season 2, it's that same entertainment, that same shock value where it's like, you don't know what's going to happen. And, this year, they had the
money ball.
The money ball, they had the chains and whatnot. It was more, within that theme of football and whatnot. I just thought it was a good continuation of what was established and what was built from last year.
Yeah, I think the thing I'll add on top of it is it does cause more drama throughout the competition. As someone who works on YouTube full time, I fully understand the idea of like using retention strategies to keep people hooked and engaged on what you're watching. And I think by the nature of you're having athletes that might have to throw over their personal best or right after their personal best that are at these distance lines, it's like this innate drama that you feel, especially it's like, let's say someone has a foul or they mess up their first throw and they're out of a challenge flag. They only have that one shot, that one throw to get over the line. So I feel like because it happens more naturally to each athlete, you just have a deeper connection as a viewer to be like, man, I hope they get over the line.
Yeah.
And then especially when you see someone like Roger who would like struggle to like maybe hit a 20-meter throw and then on his next throw just blast a 21 plus. It's like, it's crazy to see someone and like how their technique lines up.
Yeah.
I think it does well to educate, I don't know how to say this without sounding rude, but normies on the sport, you know what I mean? Like, that you could go so drastically from like missing a line and missing a throw to having a throw that might be like a meter over the line. So
Yeah.
I think there's so much excitement. And there's just that visual satisfaction of just seeing it fly over.
Absolutely. The suspense, it's like, oh, is he going to do it? Like, oh, like that was kind of short. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then you see it, it's like, all that like anxiety, all that anxiousness just right out. I'm sure that, the athletes feel that way, same, where it's like, oh, dude, like that was kind of, but, to do it again, just run it back and just hit it. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
And you're putting on a show, you got a good crowd out there. Like, you can't ask for more.
Yeah, and Rajendra placed second, and I actually kind of want to talk about him later on in the show, especially with him involving Roja, given some new news involving the status of athletes changing their allegiance to Turkey. But he had a really good showing as well. One thing I'll just even say is they added in the money ball this year, so it was a 15-pound golden shot put. I guess you only had one opportunity to throw it. And the idea is that you could use it on if you're falling on the back foot and you need that second throw and you need an easier chance to get over the line. One thing I'll say is Roger, and we don't have that throw featured here, he had a throw with the money ball that looked like 23 plus to 23 mid. And to me, that says a lot. And I think Roger is like, with the consistency he's having at the high 21s this year and going over 22 meters indoors, dude, we might see like a new Roger this year. This might be the year of Roger Steen. And that's my prediction, because you are not seeing a thrower right now as consistent as he is at those marks.
That is super fair. I'm all with it. Year of Roger.
And speaking of the year of Roger, we're going to go here, and I want to send a special thank you to professional shot putter Josh Alatunde for providing this awesome footage. Go check out his YouTube channel, check out this whole shot comp. Yeah. Bam. I love it. I love it. As you can see on the board, 2193. This is the Drake relays that only happened like 3 days after the World Shot Put Series. Roger goes out 2193. Maybe it wasn't 3 days. Maybe it was a day or so. But the fact that he was able to hold his shape and consistency that much over the weekend to, this is one of the farthest throws he's ever had outdoors. I think this might be like his number 2, number 3 throw all time outdoors. So it's like, we're seeing Roger just like, I think what gets me is, he is a gamer, dude. He is the epitome of a gamer in that a lot of his top throws happen late in competitions and usually takes him a little bit to get warmed up. But man, when he starts feeling it, he just knows how to put the pressure on when it counts and get those big throws. What do you see on his technique here? And what do you just kind of see with Roger's career moving forward, seeing that he's throwing almost 22 meters in April?
Yeah, I think, obviously he showed up big during this competition, because I believe Chuck was leading this competition for quite a while, the first, I think, couple rounds, and then Roger slowly started to build consistently. And it's funny because I was in the kitchen doing some work with Eric and Taman, and we were watching the live results, and Taman literally could like tell you exactly what Roger was going to do for each round. And I swear he was like centimeters off, his predictions of like how Roger was going to go throughout each round. But I think obviously with Roger, it's like, dude, like his movement is super consistent from what it was during the indoors, when he was going crazy. And it's like one of those things where, I talk about it almost, every throw show, where it's like, all of the best are, trusting in their preparation for moments like these, where it's like, you have a guy like Chuck who comes out big. You have other individuals who come out big and they're leading, and it's like you can trust in your technique, you can just let it, happen, you can get into that flow state and really attack a throw. And obviously Roger has been like the prime example of that, this year, the year of the Steen.
And speaking of Chuck, we actually have that video up here right now. This is 2171 from Chuck Enekwechi. He got second place in this competition. Dude, Chuck has also just reached a new level of consistency in the high 21s of late. I think it's really showing like what long-term commitment to the sport, really just fixing those little mini issues that you might have, whether it's technique or strength, and finding like that consistency. Dude, it takes a long time. And I also just think that athletes treat their bodies better now, so I feel like they're going to have longer careers than maybe throwers of the past. That's my, like, if you look at, they're both over 30.
Yeah.
And it's like, a few years ago we used to think like, oh, by the time you're 30 your career's almost over. Well, we're seeing two guys right now, and even Joe Kovacs was hitting his PRs in his 30s. Like, I don't know, man. I'm thinking you can be a thrower longer than people give credit for. It's just, I don't know if those previous generations took care of themselves the way they needed to. That's my opinion.
I think, going off that, just the axis of information, like obviously we talked about, throws at lower levels getting better because of the axis of information. I feel like from the recovery standpoint and just like the theme of longevity, with, sports like football, basketball, baseball, like all of these, major sports are, highlighting, hey, this is what we have to do to be prepared, for a very long season. And I feel like more of that information is coming out, and a lot of, our top throwers are getting access to that information, and, they're obviously, utilizing what they're learning, and they're just creating longevity, with their throws as, their throws and performances are getting better. So I feel like just with the axis of information, like everything about the sport is getting better to, previous generations and whatnot.
One thing I'll ask you is, before we move on, is what we talked a little bit about Roger's technique. What do you see on Chuck's technique here that you think is leading to like such a big throw? Because one thing to mention about Chuck is he's not even 6 foot tall. He's like 5'10".
Yeah.
Now he's demonstrable. He's incredibly
huge.
strong.
Yeah, he's huge. I think the biggest thing, like his technique looks super smooth in this toss. I believe from years before, like Chuck has always been like twitchy.
Yeah.
Like he's always had that pop, and you could always see that. And I feel like he still demonstrates that here, but it just looks a lot smoother. Whereas before, I felt like he would try to put it out, where this one, I feel like it's just happening.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I feel like just as he's going through, it's just, catching deeper positions, really just working through longer, double supports and just letting it happen.
Beautiful throw. I've always loved Chuck's technique.
Yeah. Super nimble.
And we're going to continue with the shot put, but now we're going to go to the GS home meet, which, by the way, you can watch this whole competition on the Throws University YouTube channel. That was published earlier this week. You can get a chance to watch the whole competition from our guys. You see Jeff Klein here, Luke Warning, Eric Favors, as well as Taman Johnson all competed in this meet. It was a fun shot put.
Jumbo.
Jumbo was also
Jordan
there,
West.
and Addie, Jordan West was competing as well as Addie Stiverson. So really fun meet. We did this last Friday, so I thought the guys brought the energy, and no one brought the energy more than Jeff Klein. Because Jeff finally PR'd. You see it on there. It's 1,200 days. So since his last personal best, well, Jeff finally hit 20 meters, the 20-meter barrier. His PR before this was about 1965, from like I said, a couple of years ago. And Jeff I've kind of talked about this on the throw show before. Jeff was kind of struggling, like I think the first year after graduating, trying to find his technique, figure out like what type of thrower he wanted to be. Now I think like he's been patient. He's been sticking with a technique that has been working for him in the off season. He is very consistent over 19 meters this indoor season, so he's definitely making progress. And comes out in his opener of the outdoor season, goes 20 meters even. Obviously he's excited. This is really big milestone for Jeff. You and I had the privilege to be there live. What do you think of Jeff's technique here, and what do you think of the idea of like his patience to get to 20 meters?
Yeah, I was extremely happy for Jeff. He works extremely hard. I think his first year post collegiate was a little tough for him.
Yeah.
Because he was in that like limbo of not being in the collegiate system anymore and transitioning into that professional scene. So it's like it does take a little bit of time to figure that out. Now I do think obviously being here at GS and just being around the guys kind of help expedite that process a little bit.
Right.
Once he started to figure things out and really started to click, which led to a moment like this where he can go out, be consistent throughout his whole series, and then obviously walk away with a PR. I remember talking to Jeff before this competition started, and I was like, "Yo, like, what's the goal for today?" He was like, "I would really like to be over 19 meters. I would like to be close to my PR. Obviously push towards a PR, but definitely just be over 19 meters." And I believe his first toss was over 19, or might have been.
Yeah, it was.
I'll say it was like 19 low, maybe if anything 18 high, but he got over the 19 barrier on his first attempt, and I feel like each toss was slowly getting better and better to the point where he was already kind of in that flow state. Like the intensity was high, like he knew he was in good shape, and I think it was his fourth attempt, maybe his fifth attempt, just put it together and hit this 20-meter toss, popped off. Everyone's super excited. A few of the other guys kind of hit bigger tosses, or not bigger tosses, but big tosses in their own respective way as well. And I just felt like the vibes were super high for a moment like this to come into fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff had a great day. Congrats, man. You earned it.
Absolutely.
And then also from the same competition, Luke Warning had a big day. He had the furthest throw he's had since 2022 after I spoke to him, 1959. And for him to do this in April is actually quite exciting for him because he normally doesn't start feeling well and probably until like 2 months into the season. So he doesn't really start hitting like close to mid-19 until like the end of May, June time before Nationals.
Mm-hmm.
So to see him throwing like a season's best and like the farthest throw he's had in years already in April says a lot to where Luke's shape could be, come Nationals. Obviously, qualifying for U.S. Nationals as a male shot putter is one of the hardest events to qualify for. So it's still going to be a test whether or not he makes the qualification standard. But I mean, setting himself up really well. I was talking to him. I was like, because there was a lot of technique stuff that I've had issues with Luke with over the past few years that I've expressed to him. This was the first meet where I was like, dude, you're finally finishing the throw.
Yeah, you're
like it always
it.
felt because he had a tendency of throwing down right sector every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, dude, you're like losing like an extra like half a foot you could be pushing on the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And finally he's found a technique that works for him where he's pain free and he's really chasing out of the toe board. And what do you know? It got him that extra half meter that I'm pretty sure he would be able to get.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting because I think there's still stuff that he can even work on here.
Mm-hmm.
And, we might be seeing Luke with a new PR by the end of the season. What do you see on Luke's throw here, especially for the gliders out there who, don't get as much representation?
Yeah, no, I think, he does a really good job of getting long and traveling through the circle. I think when it comes to the way he finishes, I do agree where it's like there were some things where it's like I don't agree on what, looking from the outside in, I don't agree with what you're doing. But I feel like with the work that he's been putting in with Dane, their goal was just to simplify his throw as much as possible and just to stay within, a certain framework and just get as many reps as possible.
Right.
And I feel like both him, Jeff, the other shot putters, and even us discus throwers, we have done a better job with that as a whole, not incorporating stuff that doesn't need to be incorporated, but just focusing on like 1 to 2, maybe 3 things and really just hammering that home.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a byproduct of that, right? Jeff's 20-meter toss is a byproduct of that. Luke's, season best, this is a byproduct of that. And I feel like, the more that we do that, the better that we're going to perform. And, someone like Luke, it's like, yeah, you're not squeaking into nationals anymore. You earned your spot.
Yeah.
A guy like myself, it's like, you're not squeaking in, you earn your spot.
Yeah.
And I feel like, the more that we kind of just do these, 1 to 2 things and really just hammer it home, the better performances we're going to have.
It's interesting how throwing almost becomes somewhat simpler, but equally, if not more complicated as you get older.
Yeah.
Like you have less cues with more simple verbiage, but the complexity in which it goes into getting to that point is so vast.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain unless you're like...
It's like the inverted U. It's like when you're a beginner, it's like you got to keep it simple.
Yeah.
And then the more you kind of figure things out, it's like, okay, now I'm experiencing more complicated stuff. But as you get to like the higher level, you realize that you have to just keep it simple like you're a beginner.
Yeah.
And it's just like this weird paradigm.
I'll say this. The cue that Alex attributes to him winning a bronze medal was throw the discus higher.
Yeah, literally. Like, what are we talking about? Throw it higher.
But obviously it's the years and years and reps to get to that point. But it is interesting. I don't think too many people talk about it. So to finish off this event in particular, it was just a great day all around for a lot of the GS throwers. Eric Favors here had the best throw I think he's had at this time of the year. I don't think he's thrown farther than he has with this mark in April. So he goes 20-40 to take the W in this competition. Eric had every throw over 20 meters. He looked really, really good. This is probably the best I've seen Eric consistency-wise, especially this time of the year. I really hope he just keeps chasing this feeling and finally gets that breakthrough distances. Dude, because for people that don't know, Eric is one of the strongest throwers in the world.
Absolutely.
He's snatched 170 kilos. He's power cleaned 190 kilos. He's jerked over 500 pounds. Very, very few shot putters can compare to him in the weight room, especially in the Olympic lifts. So it's we know what he's capable of. It's just a matter of him refining his technique to keep that explosive energy he has all going in the same direction, all maintaining constant acceleration to get those big throws. But honestly, kudos to Eric because this is a great way to start off the year. What do you see on this throw?
Yeah, no, I think the work that Eric and Dane have been putting in with his technique, I feel like is going to allow him to have one of his best, years, one of his best seasons.
Yeah.
Overall, obviously this was probably one of his better openings just in general. And I feel like the work, we all know he's strong. He's dummy strong. I lift right next to him and he power snatches what, I back squat. He is ridiculously strong. So we know that his strength and his explosiveness in the weight room isn't an issue. It's just figuring out, okay, what is that 1 to 2 things that we truly need to focus on in the circle to maximize your tosses so, we are pushing towards, 21, 2150 and further. And I feel like, just like I said with Luke, just like what I said with Jeff, Eric is another one of those guys who it's he's figuring out what he needs to do to throw far, and this is a perfect byproduct of that.
Yeah, and I think it's when it comes down to is guys, you can't escape working on technique. No matter how gifted you are, how strong you are, the guy who has the better technique and can constantly apply force on the implement throughout the whole throw, they're the ones who are going to win.
Absolutely.
So constantly refine your technique. Obviously, weight room is important, but never cheat the technical details or else you're going to lose out. And speaking as someone who really was refining the technical details with some time off, we're looking at the return of Brian Williams. Brian has been, he signed up for the U.S. military, correct? And he's in the WCAT program, if I'm correct about that. So he competes for Army just like Reggie does. And he basically had a 1 to 2 year layoff from discus throwing, comes back, goes to the Long Beach Invitational, throws 67.45, which is a new personal best. So the first competition he's had in a few years, PRs, and throws 67 meters. Brian has been one of those guys. He's made a couple world teams. I believe he's made a world final. He is very technically proficient. He's always been very, very consistent, which has led to him making all those teams. But to see him finally hit a breakthrough PR, especially given the layoff and given the fact that it's his first meet back, you can't ask for a better way to return to the sport. What do you
can't.
see on Brian's throw here, and what do you think of that whole story?
Yeah, to add kind of a little more pizzazz to this story is this was his first attempt.
This is his first attempt?
This was his first attempt. He PR'd, on
So
his first attempt.
His last
coming
competition was the Olympic trials in 2024, so almost 2 full years.
And come back and to go big, hit a new PR in your first attempt is crazy work. I like Brian's technique. I've always tried to, use him as a technical model because I feel like for myself, like I'm not quite close to what he does, but like I see a lot of similarities into what I do and what he does. So I've always been a big fan of what he does personally, especially with like utilizing his speed.
Yeah.
Because he's not like the biggest.
No, he's not tall.
No, he's not like the biggest, amongst, the elite discus throwers. And, I don't consider myself the biggest. Like, I'm 6 feet in shoes, So, like, I always try to, find guys who are relatively close to my build. And it's like, what are they doing that helps them throw far? And Brian has always been, like, a model for me on that part. I think the biggest thing of Brian is he stays long and like I said, he utilizes his speed, to his advantage. Like, he's super fast through the circle, but because he's staying long, the discus is traveling on a long path, and, in combination with his speed, like, all of that energy just gets transferred into the finish. And, his series was pretty consistent around, like, 64 to 65, 66 outside of his first attempt. So it's clearly, like, things are clicking for him, and it's just like continuing to build and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is a phenomenal way to start your comeback to the sport. It'll be interesting to see what happens come nationals, like if he can hold this kind of form, because I think he threw again like a few days later and threw like 63 or so, somewhere around there. So I think it's incredible, and I thought it was funny that it was 67:45 because that was actually Sam Mattis's old PR back when he was in college. So it was just kind of an interesting tie-in there. But honestly, looking at Brian, dude, he looks so smooth. Like I think I've spoken about this on the Throw Show before. But the idea, I think, of just having a break from the sport mentally might, because I only say that because I'm seeing so many throwers come back better than they were when they, took time off.
Yeah.
And I think that's where there might be something to that. And I think it also circles back to what I was saying about with Chuck and Roger is like, I think the recovery aspect is so much better than it used to be for athletes that I think it's like if you do take a year to 2 years off, you're not killing your career. Like before, people might think like, oh, you're done by 30, 32. Well, I think it's pretty evident that that's not the case if you take care of yourself. So well done, Brian. It's going to be exciting to see what you do later this season.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I need to pull this up. Okay.
I was going to say you might want to turn the volume.
Okay, so we have a big one here. Sam, you're super proud of this result as we have your athlete and Dane Miller's son, Lincoln Miller, having his second meet going over 60 meters with the 1 kilo discus. Again, he's in 8th grade. And he goes 199 2 inches for a new personal best, just short of 200 feet. Hopefully he'll have more meets to get over that 200-foot barrier. But what people keep saying about Lincoln is that his technique is beyond his years. He moves like a thrower who's been doing this, for 10 years.
Because he
Yes. So the reason why that is he actually has been throwing for over 10 years. I used to train with Dane and Lincoln back when I was in early college and high school, and Lincoln was throwing like a little 2-pound steel ball, and he was maybe 4 years old at the time. And he was doing rotations even back then. So to me, it's not that surprising. But it is crazy to see an 8th grader go almost 200 feet. Sam, you've been working on his technique very closely with his dad, Dane. What do you think of this throw here? And what do you think Lincoln has in the future, especially when he starts growing up to the 1.6 discus when he gets into his freshman year next year?
Yeah, no, this toss was phenomenal. He has been on a tear. Both him and Landon, his teammate, have been on a tear this season, and they have been putting throws together, almost every week for the last few weeks. Even indoors with Lincoln, he was going crazy then. I think one of the things is like he's always had the potential to throw far. It's just finding the right time and the right space to do that. And I feel like just with, our programming and the programming that I have for the onside athletes, it just clicked when it made sense, or, it clicked when it was the most important time. And, obviously right now is the most important time. Like he just won his middle school counties, which was, their biggest meet for championship season outside of nationals. He won that, by 30 feet. And it was just like one of those things where it was like, it all came down to the plan. Like obviously he had a great base coming in, but just making sure that we are in great shape when it matters most. And clearly, having 2 competitions he actually had 3 competitions within, I think, 3 days. He threw 197 with the 1K on Friday. He threw 44 meters with the 1.6 because I just wanted to see what he would do. And then he threw 199 too. I think this was on Monday, in a couple days. So he's in phenomenal shape, and I'm extremely excited. I'm extremely proud of his efforts, but I'm extremely excited to continue pushing because we still have a few more weeks before, the end of the season with like New Balance and Adidas Nationals. And I truly think we can get him over 200, and I think we can get him over 65 with the 4K.
Yeah, that's incredible. You don't really see that with 8th graders, and especially 8th graders moving as well as him and Landon do in the circle. I think it's like sometimes you might get that powerhouse 8th grader who's already 6'4" by the time they're 14. So it's a little easier for them. But Lincoln and Landon, now granted, they are both incredibly strong for their age.
Yeah.
But if you look at their body types, they're not like abnormalities. Because I was thinking this when I was at middle school nationals last year. I remember talking to you about this. It was like Lincoln was easily the shortest kid in that field by like 5-6 inches. And Lincoln's like normally height is a normal height for a 14-year-old. It's just most kids in that competition hit their growth spurts early, and they were all over like 6 feet tall. So it's like, and some of them were like 6'4", like I said. So that's where I think it's like when you get into these early stages of throwing, it's like I think there are some genetic advantages that really show, but it's going to be like the 2 years later where Lincoln's like time in the weight room and time in the circle is really going to outshine everyone else because his technique is just so fluid. And I think one thing I want you to kind of go a little deeper into is like, you've been working with Lincoln for a few years now. You've been working with Landon. Obviously, you've coached Olivia to a state title. And Sophia Rivera, kind of dive a little deeper into like what kind of training you use, not only working on the strength side, but also technique. And honestly, some throwers at home could actually start working with you if they choose to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we mentioned before, technique will always be the pinnacle of, your development as a thrower. And that's one of the things that we try to prioritize, as we utilize the strength training to, better that process. It's like, I want to see how athletes naturally move, and then we're going to apply our technical model on top of that base that they already have established. And then we're going to utilize the strength training to help further develop that base so that we can have athletes who are throwing extremely well, earlier on, or, throw extremely well when it's, a certain time of year, so that they can perform at their best. And I feel like that's one of the things that I've done a really good job with, especially with our younger athletes. It's like exposing them into high levels of training, but being smart and strategic so that they're not, overdoing it, so that they can compete, when it matters most. And, like you alluded, like anyone who is watching this who wants to get better can also be a part of the training system that we have developed and get training that is tailored to them. And all you'd have to do is go to throwsuniversity.com, pick up a training program, and we can get started.
Yeah, and that goes for you coaches out there, not just the athletes. So obviously we want to make sure every athlete's getting better, but also for those coaches, we have resources that you can look into to improve your coaching. We have different books that basically break down the different techniques that we talk about in throwing, but also how to cue athletes. And if they happen to make certain mistakes, you know how to correct those mistakes. It's a book called Cues and Corrections. Dane Miller, Coach Trevor Stutzman of Throws University, both collaborate on this project. I think it's one of the best resources the throwers can use. We also have the Throwers Assessment, which also takes and bridges the weight room and the physical component directly to what you can expect in the circle, basically by talking about the different weight implements you'll be throwing, how different lifts could potentially correlate to distances that you could throw in the circle, and ways to improve your technique. So we also have the perfect throw season. We're winding down to the later sides of season, so you could use this for next season if you're a coach and really have like that 12-week program that breaks down everything you need to know in order to get your athletes ready to peak at the right time for those big invitationals or state championships. So you can check out all that stuff at the link down below. You can check out and work with Sam, become an athlete and train with him. And this is for athletes of all ages, all skill levels. You can be a younger athlete. You can even be an older athlete. In fact, you've actually worked with several masters athletes who've seen great improvements over the years. So literally, if you're looking to be a thrower and become better and get the best possible training that you can get, highly recommend checking out and working with Coach Sam Weeks here. Check the link down below. And if you're a coach, we have those resources available to you as well. Again, that's throwsuniversity.com, and the links are down in the description. Okay, so now we're going to move on to, honestly, a throw I almost forgot about, but I wanted to share it because I think it's definitely showing the level of competitiveness that we're at with the men's shot put in the United States, and that's Jordan Geist. So we were talking about Roger Steen, we were talking about Chuck Enekwechi. Well, Jordan Geist wasn't going to be shown up by either of them. Went to meet at Ashland University, which is a famous university for throwers. Rest in peace, the former head coach, Judd Logan, who was a massive influence of every thrower of the last 40 years, it seems.
The GOAT.
Yeah, and Jordan comes out with his outdoor opener of 21.83. That is a massive PR. And from what, not PR, but massive opener for Jordan, but it is a United States PR. So all of Jordan's throws over 22 meters has actually happened internationally. So to see him go out and hit a massive throw in the United States as an opener, between him and Roger, those are the two guys that have really leveled up their consistency at these higher marks above 21.50 as of late. He medaled at the World Indoors, just as Roger did. He got silver there. Jordan is, I think both Jordan and Roger, they are going to be the ones that are going to be fighting over the championship at nationals. That's my prediction. What do you see on Jordan's throw here, and what do you think of a 20.83 opener?
Dude, a 20.83 opener is huge,
Yeah.
Especially with, the load that he has with coaching at Shippensburg. Now,
No, he coaches Slippery Rock.
Slippery Rock, excuse me. I think they competed recently at Shippensburg.
Yes.
Roger also coaches, he coaches D3. They were actually at Ramona with us, which, shout out to Roger. He was a big help with the event at Ramona. He was shagging. He didn't have to, but he got out there. It was wet.
Roger's such a great guy.
He was a great guy. He was the
I love
MVP,
him.
in my opinion. But obviously these two guys, right, they coach and they have a lot on their plate. But to come out and compete, so well this earlier on, it's just, it's like doubling down of what they did indoors. Like, obviously, Jordan had a phenomenal indoor season, having it was like 2 competitions back to back over 22.
Yeah.
And then I think he did it one more time a little bit later on, if I recall.
But I can't remember.
He threw over 22,
Yeah.
a couple occasions, which is, huge. It was huge PR for him then, and then obviously it was great seeing him do that. And then obviously
the indoor silver medal.
Silver medal, yup. To kind of go off that. And then it's like continuing that work. It's like not taking too much of a step back, quote unquote, but it's like you're still in good shape with, you know, all that you're doing, and then going out there and, you know, hitting one. And it's like for him to throw this far this early tells him that he's still in shape. And it's like as he continues to fine tune, it's like, dude, it's gonna be a battle at nationals.
Dude, the thing that gets me about Jordan every time, it's his middle to finish. He might have like one of the best middle to finishes in the world right now in terms of like what you should be watching on how you attack the ball and stay on it in the delivery. I have like no notes on here. Like he's grounded. Jordan has also been very, very fast. He's been notorious as one of the fastest shot putters probably ever.
Yeah.
But dude, 2183, especially at a place like Ashland. I think every thrower, if you have the opportunity, should try to make a trek out to Ashland and get a good comp in, because I think their facilities are incredible, and I actually had the chance to compete there, and it's you kind of feel the legacy of Judd there. It's awesome. And one thing I wanted to bring up, this is a fun one. I felt like I couldn't do a throw show without bringing this up, and this might be the last time we bring this up because I think we've kind of overstated at this point. What we see on screen is the WWE. This is from WrestleMania this past weekend. And the reason why I want to share this was the guy who just pushed over the beast, Brock Lesnar, is Darula Oba Femi, formerly Isaac Ogubson out of Alabama. He was a shot putter All-American. He was actually Eric Favor's rival back in the SEC. But he beat and apparently retired Brock Lesnar over the weekend. This was really fun. This is like Isaac's big breakthrough in the WWE on the mainstream stage. And to beat and retire, you know, basically probably the most famous wrestler in the last like 20 years outside of guys like John Cena and The Undertaker, and retire him. You can't really get a, you know, bigger stamp of approval than that from the WWE, can you?
No, literally. It was like this was the passing of the torch to, you know, the big, just brawling wrestler who's, you know, who's super athletic and who's going to, you know, do moves that you wouldn't think a big guy would do. And, you know, Oba, you know, retiring Brock was that passing of the torch. And it's super exciting to see, you know, the success that he's having, you know, post throwing in, you know, the world of WWE. And I think one of the cool things is like, it's very subtle. You kind of have to know, but Oba will incorporate some of his like throwing stuff into his wrestling moves. He had a open challenge the other night, I think it was last night actually, where, you know, he just wrestles anyone who wants to challenge him, and he had a move where he grabs a guy and he shot puts him in the ring, and it's like he even has the shot put tape job, and like the hand, like it's still there, like he's still you know, showing, you know, little glimpses of, you know, his throwing past, and it's just super exciting to see like one of our very own throwers is thriving in another sport endeavor, and
he embraces it. He embraces like the fact that what you just said, it's part of his character. And not only that, I give WWE a lot of credit in that. I don't know if you saw the hype package they did for him that was like leading into this match, but it was half of it was like a documentary about him being a shot putter. They interviewed his coaches.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was really cool and really well done. I actually sent it to Dane. Like I actually told Dane, if you saw on our Instagram, throws you Instagram. Like he actually made a post about like 2 days prior about to go cheer on Oba. But everything I've heard about Oba is he's just a great guy, great character. And the fact that he uses that shot put influence in his character, like every thrower should be a fan of Oba. I know not everyone's a fan of wrestling, but like you should be a fan of throwing, because he is literally putting the largest spotlight on the sport than probably anyone else in the entire world is. Because every time he gets announced to the ring, Michael Cole, the announcer, is always like, he was a former Division I All-American at Alabama in the shot put. Like now more and more people are being introduced to the sport through Oba, and it's just cool to see. And the final thing I'll put a pin on this with is it's very fitting that he retired Brock Lesnar, not only because that he's going to be positioned in the same way in the company as Brock was, but Brock also has a very strong tie to shot putting in that his daughter, Maya Lesnar, is a 2-time NCAA champion. And from what I can tell, is still throwing post-collegiately and is probably going to be a very dominant force in the world of international shot putting in the future.
Absolutely.
So the fact that you have this weird tie of sports between Lesnar and Oba on multiple different levels, it's crazy to see. And dude, here's the other thing. Oba looks like that and he's over 300 pounds.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me though. Like that's a great physique and he's over 300. Gosh damn. Anyway, I just want to share that. That's kind of a cool nerding out thing for me and Sam. But well done to Isaac. I don't know how much we're going to talk about this in the future because now he's established. But I think it's really cool and a good spotlight for the sport.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the big hammer throws of the season. And gosh dang it, if the Canadians just... They can't be stopped.
They can't be this.
The Canadian duo of Ethan Katzberg and Cameron Rogers, they are the future goats of the sport if they're not the current goats. Ethan Katzberg, they both and Cameron Rogers both open up at the Kipkeino Classic in Kenya. They always throw well at this meet, ironically enough, and Ethan went 82-43 on his opener, and Cameron has her third meet over 80 meters. I don't know what to say at this point, man. They're just like... Anytime they're in an event, they just win, and they're hitting all-time historic marks. We're talking about Ethan Katzberg, a guy who's 23, 24, and think of 82 meters as like just a normal meet for him. That is insane. You're, of course, more the hammer expert on staff. What do you think about these throws? I know they're not necessarily the best angles, but what do you think of just Cameron's consistency and also just Ethan's consistency over these, like I said again, historic marks?
Yeah, no, I think I recently had a conversation with Brandon Amo of UVA, and he, was sharing just some information just about like general training principles and whatnot. And we were talking about the hammer because he is from Rhode Island, which is like the mecca of hammer throwing, and he was using Ethan as an example of why he throws so far and what was the development that brought him to that point. And it was just like, as we were going through this conversation, a lot of the things that he was bringing up just make sense to why Ethan throws so far so effortlessly, throughout a very long season. And I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, when you have an athlete and you are training them, with the correct tools earlier on, when they get older, they're going to be in a position where they are going to transfer all of that into, what they're currently doing. Like, if you throw far at a young age, you're never going to forget how to throw far. And as you start to mature, right, into the, open divisions, you're going to utilize that skill to throw far more than anything.
Right.
And I feel like that's exactly where Ethan and Cameron are. They are being coached by some of the best minds, in the sport right now. And all of that groundwork that they've been putting in, throughout the years of their come up is really starting to blossom a little bit more, as they're in the professional reign. And I just feel like, as they continue to blossom, they're really going to start, taking that step forward, compared to everyone else. They already kind of have, but it's like they're going to keep pushing that and further, get ahead.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's, if you can compare it to any athlete, I think top of mind right now is Ryan Krauser. He was throwing since he was in elementary school, basically.
He was throwing far earlier on.
Yeah.
And what happens? He's still throwing far. He could be hurt. He could have blood clot in his legs, a messed up elbow. And you know what he's going to do?
He's going to win.
He's going to throw far. He's going to win.
Yeah. Not just throw far, he is going to win.
He's going to win. I ain't betting against him.
Yeah, well done, Ethan and Cameron. We're going to keep talking about these two because they're just lighting the world on fire.
Canadian sweep.
Yeah. Dude, it's crazy between men and women. It's like Canada's just dominating this event, and for how young they are, they're gonna keep dominating.
Mm-hmm.
No signs of slowing here.
Nope.
And another big throw. This is actually a new African record, as we see Antoinette Nabwe here go 77.64. This is following up another huge meet, which happened only a few days prior, where she threw 75 for the first time. I believe, and I could be wrong about this, she only threw 70 meters like once or twice prior to this whole series of going 77.
Maybe.
Yeah, like I do not believe she's been that consistent with 70 meter throw. I think she's added almost like 6 to 7 meters to her personal best in this season alone, which is insane. And this is also 3 centimeters off the NCAA record. So it's an African record for Nigeria. Ironically enough, breaking Annette Echikunwoke's former African record, because that was the African record, because that's when Annette competed for Nigeria, but then she switched allegiance to the United States. So she was still the African record holder despite competing as an American athlete. But Antoinette is staying with Nigeria, so this is a new African record, a new continental record. 77.64. Again, just short of the NCAA record. This is a massive toss.
Massive, yeah, dude.
We're talking about a future 80-meter thrower who we
Yes.
weren't thinking about in this light even only a couple months ago. Now, she proved herself in the weight as winning the NCAA weight title, but we've seen athletes throw those distances before and not carry over quite as well to the hammer. She carried that incredibly well over to the hammer and is now the number 2 NCAA thrower all time in the women's hammer, and is setting up a massive career for herself post-collegiate. What do you see on Antoinette's throw here, and what do you think of just adding so much distance in such little time? I feel like this is the year of collegiates just hitting monster PRs, because Texas Tanner is doing the same stuff.
Absolutely. I think with Antoinette, like, she's been on the come up the last couple years. I remember, we got the privilege to watch her and her teammates compete at Ramona, where she opened up fairly well. She opened up pretty big. I think she opened up with a PR last year.
I think it was like 68.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's just like, obviously, the more experience that she's getting, the better she's becoming, especially with the Minnesota team. I feel like when, we're talking about hammer throwers, like, they have been the squad as of right now to really kind of take that step forward amongst, some of the other schools that have rich history with the hammer throw. With her, like, obviously, with hammer, being a right-handed thrower, you want to make sure that you're getting the ball left, really stretching out, and then just utilizing, your speed throughout each turn. And I feel like she does a phenomenal job of that, staying smooth and staying long and staying relaxed and not really forcing the throw, but letting it happen, just transferring all of that energy into the finish. When you can double down and really focus on those things, it makes throwing super easy, and I feel like that's exactly what this is.
Gosh.
Just butter. Just super smooth, super relaxed, super strong. Yeah.
That's what you want to see in a hammer throw. And the thing is, there's 2 months left of the season, so how much farther can she go?
We'll find out.
And man, I swear we talk about this guy in almost every throw show, but he just keeps making history, so we can't not talk about him as Texas Tanner. Sets a new personal best, not in the discus, but in the hammer throw. 78.87. He's creeping so close to 80 meters now. This is the American collegiate record, meaning he's the farthest American athlete to throw this distance. And what's funny, I think he's still like 2.5, 3 meters almost away from the NCAA record by Balazs Kiss, who was from Hungary back in the 90s. He's the 96 Olympic champion. But Texas Tanner, 78.87, like Rudy Winkler never threw that far in college. And he's doing it while being a triple threat, shot putter. Just went 69.56 in the discus, which I believe was also the American collegiate record in the discus. Again, you're the hammer guy, so you're gonna know more about this. But like, he was one of the best ring event throwers of all time before this throw. To me, this just stamps it.
Yeah. No, I want to give a shout out to Everything Throws because they made a post about Tanner's just collecting all of the Infinity Gems to his Infinity Gauntlet. And I feel like when we're just talking about the throwing events, it's like this dude has all of them outside of Javelin, which on one of his other posts, I was like, what can't he do? And he actually responded back to me. He's like, I can't throw jab, which I think is kind of funny. But dude, like every time we talk about him, dude, I say like he's a phenomenal athlete, and it's just one of those things where he's proving that statement right.
Yeah.
Like he's doubling down on, every event. Like, a lot of people were talking about his 69-meter toss at Ramona and how you're chasing the win. Well, he doubled down and he threw 66, the following week.
Yep.
I forget where it was at.
That was Long Beach because it was the same meet that Brian threw at.
Okay, yes, that's correct. He doubled down through 66. Like, you can't.
And now he's throwing basically 79 in the hammer.
You can't talk to him. Like he's that guy right now. And like you said, yep, like I know he did well at Ramona in the hammer as well, and obviously just double it down as he's going through. It's like, dude, this dude he's phenomenal. Like he's actually that guy, bro. Like he's him.
Well, he won Ramona and threw 74 meters, but it's like that doesn't tell the whole story. He had to deal with 6 hours of rain delay, and I don't think he threw until 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And there was rain covering the whole sector, so you needed boots just to walk up and retrieve your hammer. Mm-hmm. So he was probably dealing with wet socks, too.
Probably. I hate wet socks. But, dude, like, it's like he's in a class of his own right now.
I think if there's one piece of conversation that this opens up, because between him, guys like Tarek, even Jordan Geist, are we going to see more of a trend of throwers going post-collegiate, doing multiple events? Because there is a financial component to that. Mm-hmm. The more you can compete, the more money you can make. And especially if you're looking to be like a hammer thrower, we know there's less opportunities there. But if you can balance that with being a shot putter or a discus thrower, well, now it's just, if you can stay competitive in both events, the hammer is just kind of a nice little cherry on top in terms of your income.
Yeah. That's a good question. Obviously, you want to be financially stable, post-collegiate because, it's rough out here.
Yeah.
But it also depends on, like, what... I always like to stay within the thought process is, like, stick to what you're good at. Yeah. Now, obviously, he's good at everything else.
What is he more good at? You tell me.
Dude, before he went 69, I was like, all right, he's a good discus thrower. Like, he's a good discus thrower, but he was a better hammer thrower. But, with him going 69 and then doubling down going 66, like he could go, the discus route. Now there's no money there. So I would say, like, go hammer. But, like, he's a phenomenal shot putter as well. But I don't think he would go shot put. I think, if anything, he would go hammer.
If he wasn't American, maybe shot put, but he is American. So I would, unless you're throwing 2150.
I think hammer is the smartest move for him and just how he's built. But I think discus could be, like, your double event, go have fun, see what happens.
Well, we'll see what happens when he goes 71 at Ramona next year. So what then?
Yeah.
Anyway, incredible job, Texas. You're just making history every week. I hope talking with him. He's a really nice guy, and just keep having fun with it because that's
absolutely.
The more loose you are, the more confident, the more positive you feel going to these meets. Only good things will happen.
Absolutely.
And we're gonna stay with the hammer throw as Brooke Anderson takes the American women's lead at 78.56 here. Brooke Anderson's a former world champion in 2022. She's kind of had some issues the last recent years in terms of her performance at Worlds or Nationals. I hope to see Brooke back on top because she's a phenomenal person, but she's also an incredible athlete. She's one of the few 80-meter hammer throwers in the world in history to ever do it. Opening up her season here, 78.56. What do you think of Brooke's throw here and as far as an opener for the season?
Yeah, dude, I feel like this toss would have been a toss that we saw later in the year for Brooke.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously she's doing that very early on, which tells us that she's in really good shape. Now, like you mentioned, just a few seconds ago, like she does really well, like she does well opening her season and then kind of in that middle. And then it's like as we get into like championship season, that's where it's like that barrier just kind of comes up.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things where it's like, I wish that as she progresses this year, and obviously there's no, big championships this year, but it's like, let's use this year to kind of get over that, barrier, and then that will set us up for next year. And then obviously as we get into the Olympic year in 28, it's like, let's use this to build then to, get ready for the Olympics.
I think if she could go over 78 at nationals, that would be a big confidence booster
Absolutely.
for her.
I agree with that. I feel like if you can stay within this shape and go 78 plus, because, the way that women's hammer has been going on right now, our women are showing up.
Yeah, I don't know what 78 can get you now. That might not even make podium at this rate.
Our women have been showing up. Team USA all the day. But it's just like, it's like you're in phenomenal shape. Keep figuring it out. Obviously a lot of these upper pros have been utilizing like sports psychologists and whatnot. And I feel like the more that we can kind of just, get into that realm and just figure out what we need to do as professional athletes, I feel like Brooke will be, one of our leaders, all this year. And then, as we progress into the next 2 years.
Absolutely. And we're going to go in here, and we're going to stay brief on this one, but Simon Roselli is now proving that he's a shot putter. So he is the current discus leader in the United States, chasing down that national record of Mason Finley, Ryan Krauser, whoever you want to select as the national record holder. But going 68-9 in the shot put here. The thing I'll say about these high school kids now is they throw like professionals. Their technique is very, very, very strong. And he stays grounded. He's a tall guy, got long limbs, so that's extra pull and push you can get on the ball. What do you see on Simon's throw here, and what do you think of him now being a dual threat in the shot put and the discus?
Yeah, bro, like I think it's just sick. They'll be like, I'm the national leader in discus, and I'm just picking up shot for fun, and I'm within the top 5. Like that's sick, bro. Like not too many people can say that, and I feel like that's a cool title to be like, like I'm that dude. Technique wise, I do like his movement. There is a lot of commonalities between his disc toss and his shot toss. I think he's a little long getting to the middle with this one, but dude, he's a discus thrower. Like, that's where the money's at. That's where his priority is at. I think shot's just kind of one of those things where it's like, whatever happens, happens. But I think overall, like, he's still super long. His footwork's still, still good. He catches the discus in a really he catches the shot in a really good position and just transfers that power into the finish, which results in a big toss. I think if anything, if he just stays wide, get his right down a little bit sooner in the middle, that might be closer to 70 feet.
Yeah, and he is number 4 in the U.S. all-time high school list for shot put discus combos, and it's kind of cool to see. Nicholas Arrhenius is number 3. He had a really far discus throw because he used to be the national record holder. I think he threw like 234. So it's cool to see, and like, so he is 20 feet away from matching Ryan. Now I assume he's taking Ryan's best marks from, I assume, the outdoor season, and then him throwing 237. So this is wild to see. Keep progressing in both. It would not surprise me to see him throw over 70 feet, and obviously let's see if he can break in the 230s by the end of the season for discus.
Yeah.
And then we have getting to the javelin as Madison Wiltrout goes 63.74 for a new personal best to win the Drake relays. Same with you being the javelin expert here. 63.74. That's a great throw for this time of the year.
Yeah, that's a toss.
What do you think of Madison's throw here, and what do you think of this as a new PR and winning Drake relays?
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal, and that's what we love to see. I love javelin. Javelin is actually one of my favorite events to coach, especially when I was back at Merrimack. Like, Merrimack was a jav school, so I have a deep love for the javelin. With Madison, one thing that kind of is like a glaring thing for me is just like her javelin is a little bit lower, but even with it being in a lower position, she's still long, she's still relaxed, and she really gets into the block and just transfers all of that energy into the finish. And, you know, it's like one of those things where it's like you can have uniqueness as long as you are still executing within a technical model, and it's technique versus style. And her technical model is, you know, flawless. Now her style might be a little different, but when you're throwing 63 plus, what does it matter? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think this is a phenomenal toss. I think this is a phenomenal opener. Obviously, big PR, and let's keep building.
Yeah, this is a great performance. Well done, Madison, and it's exciting to see where you're going to end up later this season, especially leading into nationals. This is a national winning possible mark here.
Yeah.
Well done. And this one's kind of cool to see as we see Masateru Yugami out of Japan. We've had several meets with him at this point. He's actually come out and thrown at Garage Strength a few times, but he competed at Ramona and set a new Japanese national record of 65 meters 38. So he's the first ever Japanese athlete to ever throw 65 meters, which is really, really cool. I actually have always really liked his technique. I just think sometimes he has issues with like catching the discus and actually getting a solid release out. But like movement wise, he's very solid. I'll also say, like, dude, he is thick. Like going up to him, like
strong.
He
very
is
strong.
Very hypertrophic. And I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough with him is, I don't know if he's fully deaf, but he's at very least like half deaf. He's partially deaf. So it's not easy for him to hear, and like, you know, coaching, I think, is, you know, you have to make some compromises in the coaching to make sure that he understands what he needs to do. Especially because there's also a language barrier, because his coach is Ben Harradine, the former Australian champion. So it's cool to see Yugami hit another 65-meter throw, hit a new PR, add to his Japanese national record. You see him throw a couple times in person. What do you think of his technique? And you actually had dinner with him, too.
Yeah, so when we went to Ramona, him and his team, they were there, and I believe he went 63 when we were there. Now, when we were there was no wind. Whoever was preying on my downfall, you won. There was no wind. We did not get to chase the wind. It was so sad. But he went 63, I think, on day 2, which was really good. He was really cooking up towards, you know, day 2 and the back half of that competition. One of the things I remember just seeing him in person was like, he was doing a really good job of staying long out of the back and then getting to a good power position, and then just really working a long position into the finish, which helped him throw far. And, you know, throwing that far when there was no wind when we went was like, okay, like, he's in really good shape. And I didn't know that they were going to stay out there. It was a really smart move that they did, because the weekend that we were there was not what Ramona is known for. But taking that, continuing to build throughout the week, and then going out here and throwing 65 plus, like, yeah, he earned that more than, you know, a lot of people want to credit Ramona, whatever, but he earned that toss. And I think if he continues to do what he's currently doing, he's going to have a phenomenal year for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. The Asian games are going to be out this outdoor season, so he might walk away. I'm trying to think who might be the top discus throwers in Asian countries. Well, Iran doesn't really have anyone anymore because they had Haddadi for a while. I'd have to look at it, but he might actually be in a pretty good spot to actually win the Asian games.
Yeah.
So good luck to you, Yugami. It's awesome watching you throw. Hope to see you again. And, you know, honestly, if you have the chance, we'd love to have you at PowerFest again. That was fun.
Absolutely.
This one's someone I want to bring up because, similar to Brian Williams, this guy has had a couple-year layoff, dealing with a lot of injuries. And this is Ola Isene out of Norway. He's done a lot of competitions with Mattis overseas, and we used to talk about him a lot. So several years ago, he had a PR of 67 meters, and then after just injury after injury, he's really had a long layoff. Comes back to Ramona, throws 66.29, and now getting close to the shape that he's been in a couple of years ago. I've always liked Ola. Mattis would say is a good guy, and I like the way he approaches the discus. He just tries to attack the crap out of it every time. But going 66 meters here on his comeback from injury, it's always good to see an athlete overcome hardship like that. What do you see on his throw here? And I'm not sure how much you know Ola.
I love Ola, bro.
Okay.
Bro,
Okay, you're an Ola fan.
I love Ola, bro. When I was figuring out how to throw far, when I was just first training with Dane, I used to watch him all the time. I would screen record my, phone of his tosses, and I would slow it down, and I'd be like, dude, like, I like the way that he attacks his throw. Like, he's fast. He's long and he's fast. And it's like, I always try to emulate that with my toss. Now, my technique's not as good as his, but just like the way that I attack my throw, especially when I'm at my best, was very reminiscent of Ola. I've always been a big fan of his technique, bro. Like, I'm fanboying low-key right now, but like, I've always liked his technique, and I feel like for him to go to Ramona and PR is like...
Well, it's not PR. It's
close. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like within a meter, though.
Sorry. Within a meter of his PR, like, you can't ask for more. Like, This is huge. I'm glad if anyone, was able to utilize the Ramona wins, because I surely did not. It's this dude. And,
I don't know, man. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the net. It doesn't
the
look
net's
like
not moving, but... anything was better than what we had. No knock on Ramona. That's not something that you can control, right? But man,
Caleb hasn't mastered weather controlling technology quite yet.
We need the big fans. The fans blowing into the sector, man. But nah, like, all jokes aside, like, this is a phenomenal toss, and I'm glad that these guys are returning to the sport and are performing really well. And, continuing to just bring more eyes to the sport and, just pushing far throws, bro. Like, who doesn't like far throws?
Yeah, exactly. Who doesn't? Yeah, congrats, Ola. It's awesome to see, and I hope you're on the comeback train with your career. So we're going to stay in Ramona for our last two throws, and these were throws that we didn't get to during our big, giant Ramona episode. And I felt a little bad about that, so I want to give these guys credit where it's due. And also, there's a slight bit of conversation we need to have specifically with this athlete. This is Roja Stona setting a new personal best of 70 meters 66 during the World Invitational weekend at Ramona. So his PR originally, oddly enough, was 70 even at the Olympics, where he won gold for Jamaica. But it was cool to see that he added a few more centimeters to his PR. One thing I noticed that Alex and Mattis told me was Roja was throwing like he wasn't in wind, and they thought he would have thrown probably 68 to 69 meters on this throw without wind. Like, he wasn't really using it to his advantage, maybe like an athlete like Steven Richter was. But, dude, I think Roja has one of the best techniques in discus history. I love his movement. I had a strong feeling in Paris that he was going to do some damage. I did not expect him to win, but I knew based off his qualifying he was in shape to do something big. But one thing about Roja, though, and I want to kind of open up a conversation to you, there's a chance he did switch allegiances to Turkey, but that might not go through given a most recent World Athletics ruling that basically countries can't buy athletes.
Yeah.
So no one's really for sure knowing what's going to happen with the Jamaican athletes like Roja and Rajinder Campbell in the shot put. If they will commit to Turkey and they're going to still try to compete for them, or are we going to see them return at the Commonwealth Games and compete for Jamaica this outdoor season? It'll be interesting to see. We see a little bit of Roja's throw here, but what do you think of kind of like Roja's throwing and also just kind of his status as an athlete?
Yeah, dude, like, to go, what was it, like 70, 90?
70-66 was his throw.
70, 66?
Yeah.
Okay, excuse me. It was weird because it was like he hit that and he just kind of like
Oh yeah, he had like
relaxed
no,
about
yeah,
it.
no
Like he had no
reaction.
real reaction. And it was, I don't want to say like overshadowed, but it was kind of overshadowed. But like it's still a phenomenal toss. Like he is a phenomenal athlete. He's our Olympic champ, and it's like one of those things where it's like I know that he's going to continue to just push throws far. He's going to be, one of the top guys, especially as, we get to later in the season. Now, obviously, going out to Ramona, like having a PR of 70 meters flat and only adding 66 centimeters in, this place that you're supposed to PR big, like I could see that being underwhelming, but overall, like that's still a phenomenal toss, especially with how competitive the field was.
Yeah.
Still phenomenal. Now, regarding the turkey thing, it's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Obviously these guys are just trying to get into a spot where they can be financially stable. Just because our sport isn't the most lucrative, for everyone, especially, athletes in the field event. So that was like the main basis of why they were trying to switch allegiances. It's so that they could be financially stable for years to come, so they can, continue to push and, be involved into the sport, at this higher level. And, it's very unfortunate that they got denied, especially, with sitting out of the World Championships. And it's just like one of those things where like I feel for these guys, because it's like, dude, that stinks, to intentionally sit out because you believe that you can, switch allegiances so you can be more financially stable, just for the governing body to rug pull under you and say, we don't think so. It's messed up.
Yeah, well, it's a shame because him and Rajendra were in Tokyo last year, but they didn't compete.
Yeah.
And it's like, how much money was it potentially lost for Roja if he medaled?
Pretty penny.
Yeah, so it's hard to say. Dude, it's like you don't want to bring politics into it, but the problem is Olympic sports are just weird. They're so naturally tied to nationalism that it's like you're going to offend everyone because you're not representing a company, you're representing a country. So even though the athletics federations, different countries have different benefits for their athletes, there's always going to be that innate, like from your home countrymen that are going to be against you because they think that you should just represent your country no matter who you are, and that it's country above money. But the reality is that's not how life works. Life works around money, and in order for you to pursue a passion like discus throwing, you need a solid income. Like you can't just keep throwing discus and expecting that you can be the best in the world if you need to hold down a job. Now we're going to talk about a thrower who does that and has still performed well, but he's had a lot of setbacks in his career that I think prevented him from even achieving more greatness in his career. So in that respect, it can be done. But I do feel for Roja, and obviously we don't know exactly what his status is right now in regards to competing internationally. I think it's a shame that Jamaica has done so much to block his transfer of allegiance, because I do want him to be financially well off. But at the end of the day, if he's going to compete more often at international meets like the Commonwealth Games later this outdoor season, it's hard for me to be against it because I am a fan of watching him throw, and the more I get to see him throw, as a fan, it's more content for us, and obviously he's a great thrower, and we like seeing him throw.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's a wait and see kind of thing with Roja and Rajendra to see where they'll end up in the next few months and if that ruling actually goes through. And this is one last throw that I wanted to cover. This is Alex Rose, garage strength athlete. He threw over 70 meters at the Ramona Invitational a few weeks ago. This is from our live stream, which you can check out every single live stream on the Throws University YouTube channel. I highly recommend you checking those out. But this is Alex throwing over 70 meters. This is the farthest throw he had that weekend that was marked. He did have a foul, which I'm convinced was over 73 in this competition. But it's over 70 here. Again, when I was talking about an athlete who has to balance being, full-time employee while also balancing being an Olympic level athlete, it's Alex. He works a full-time job. competes for Samoa, but he was the bronze medalist last year outdoors. One of the coolest moments I ever got to see. But I kind of wanted to briefly cover this throw and your take on his technique here. If I can just find the clip. There we go.
Yeah, obviously, Alex is one of our own, GS faithful, really good athlete, full-time worker, parent of two. He has two children now. Obviously he has a lot going on, but, to still show up in the most stacked field outside of a major championship and throw 70 meters, it's like you can't be upset with that,
Dude, I'm telling you though, that one foul he had where he just stepped over the front of the circle, like we were actually memeing him about it, and he was a good sport about it. I swear that throw is at least 73. It was so much further than what this throw was.
Yeah.
Too bad it doesn't count.
Yeah, too bad it doesn't count.
But this one's real.
Obviously, we talked about it earlier. His 1Q for, the championships was throw it higher.
Yeah.
And I feel like, when we talk about just simplicity, especially under Dane's technical model, it always comes back to Alex. Like, Alex is that guy who, is super long, super smooth, just transfers it into the finish. I think the one kryptonite with Alex's technique is just his release on the disc.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have, the most butter release, no issues, and then sometimes it looks like a duck.
Yeah.
So I think if there was anything, to critique on Alex, it would be his release. But outside of that, dude is phenomenal. Like, he is the real deal. Another one of those athletes who's just massive, but is super nimble and super just, who has it all, when they're in the circle.
It's easy to forget how big Alex is until you hang out with him for a weekend, and you're just
he's massive.
You're so big. Dude, he's Samoan, all right.
Yeah.
He's got all the assets of a great Samoan athlete. But yeah, man, I want to do just a little one shout out to Alex to say, he did throw over 70 meters in Ramona. It's a massive accomplishment for him, massive accomplishment for the Garage Strength team. Sam Mattis also broke the American record in the same competition, and I uploaded all of his throws that I shot with my camera to the Throws University YouTube channel last week. So if you're interested in checking out all of Sam's throws that led to that American record, that's live for you on the YouTube channel, so you can check that out after you're done watching the throw show. But I also want to finish with Alex for another reason. We talked about Lincoln earlier in this episode. He's in middle school, and he's been training with you for a few years, been training with Dane, obviously, since he was very, very little. But we also have athletes that compete at the professional level, like the shot putters we discussed earlier, as well as Alex Rose. And I think it's just important to understand, it's like, you don't have to be a professional athlete to train with Throws University. Mm-hmm. We cover athletes of all age groups, all skill level. Like I said earlier, you also work with masters athletes. And I kind of want you to take a little deeper into kind of how the system, works with everyone, it accommodates to everyone, but it's like how you can literally develop into that system from a day one athlete to elite.
Yeah, I mean, it was very similar to what I mentioned before. It's like taking the technical model of the athlete and where they're currently at and just, improving on where they're at through our technical model, through what we do in the circle and what we do in the weight room. From the beginner athlete to the professional to the masters athlete, there is a realm for everyone, right? Our training system can be utilized in all different facets of, development. And that's one of the things that, we show on a daily basis, whether it's Lincoln throwing 199 or, Sam breaking the American record, or one of our masters athlete, Ed Davis, throwing 47 meters at Ramona and taking the number one spot for athletes over the age of 70. Like, there is a spot for everyone and anyone who wants to get better. And it's just utilizing all of our experiences and just creating a toolbox of the necessary tools for any athlete who wants to get better to become better.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, if you're a coach, we also have resources for you as well in our books and our courses. So literally for everyone involved in throwing, like we have stuff that can help you be better at what you want to do, whether that is throwing or coaching. And at the end of the day, we just want to get everyone to go out, throw, and drop some bombs.
Absolutely.
Peace.